Alright everybody, so today we're going to be changing the ignition coil on cylinder 8. I'll explain a little bit how I know that it's going to be that one, but most of the tools that we're going to be used are here. Some of them won't be, they're just kind of here because they've worked to take the old ones out. These work for the bottom of that, but I'll show you that in a second. But the reason that I know it's cylinder 8 is one, we had an engine code come up, rough idle, trying to figure out what's going on. So we plugged our computer in and it said that it was cylinder 8 had a misfire. I'll plug in a picture of what was kind of going on from the screen here. So once we figured out it was that, we actually already have changed the coil packs, plugs, all of that on this truck. It's a 05 Ford F-150. We had everything already changed. We did plugs, we did coil packs, the whole 9 yards when we did it. These are the coil packs that we replaced, the standard stock Motorcraft ones that came in it. And for some reason this one went bad, so we decided, we had one left from when we changed them that the boot was still intact and didn't destroy, so I'll kind of explain a little bit more of why I took this one out and a little. So let's head over to the truck. So as you can see back there, I have red ones and then I have a black one. The black one back there in the back and then this red one up here towards the front. So as I said, I had that black one already here from where we did them the last time. This one didn't break apart, so we decided to keep it because there was nothing wrong with it, just the mileage was getting up there that we decided to change them early before we had a incident with it. So a little bit of preventative maintenance, if you want to call it that. So when the one on the 8th failed, I took it out and plopped that new one in to see what kind of would happen. Started the truck back up, ran smooth, ran great. So I'm gonna pop that one out, replace it with a new one, just so that way we have a test one, just so if one of these other ones decide to go, we can use that one that I know works as long as I don't destroy it taking it out. So kind of how I figured out that, granted with the scan tool, but another way that you can figure it out is you can unplug the plug that's in the back of it, and if it doesn't change, doesn't get worse, you know that that's the cylinder that it's missing at least for that one. So what you can do is unplug the one that's missing or you think is going wrong, and if the engine doesn't change, well, you know at least there's one wrong with that. And then you can come over to another one over here. As you can tell, we got all the red ones over here again. You can unplug one of these, and if the engine runs worse, then you know that that one was good and it was firing. And if you plug it back in and it straightens back out to what it was normally, well, then you know that it was something going on with that one cylinder that you unplugged. But what we're going to do first is make us a little bit of room, because I put everything back together to run it to make sure that everything ran fine, ran great. But like I kept the bands loose up here, so we'll kind of go through of how to take it out if we were starting from scratch. So with this, first thing, pop that off, then your air filter will come out. This is just a normal nut on top. You can also use a flathead screwdriver. I used a flathead screwdriver for both of these just because that's what I had back here. That was pretty easy. So now with this connector, there's a little pin out here. Push that down and around and wiggle, and it pops right out. So now you're ready to pull this out. Now be careful, because these wires run here into the bottom, so don't just pull up and rip it off, because then you'll have an even bigger of a mess. So just gently kind of work it out. Pop this one, just kind of pull, work, move, however you have to do it. Once again, watch those wires, watch these wires, watch the wires everywhere, because you do not want to cause yourself more issues than what you already have. So move that up out of the way. Now you got a little more room to kind of get your arm back in there and work into there. So with this, because as you can tell, there is not a lot of room, so I'm going to kind of do this part by part. I'll show you where the bolt is that you have to take out, and then take the plug out, but I'm not going to be able to do this while you guys watch, so it's going to be a little bit of broken up here. So the first thing I'm going to do is the fuel rail that's right here. I'm going to loosen these nuts that are holding it on, just so that way it gives me a little bit of movement, a little bit of flexibility, so I can get that coil out without destroying it, or at least that's the hope. So we'll loosen. And you don't have to take them all the way out if you don't want to. You can just loosen it, especially for this, just because I'm going to just loosen them just so I have a little bit of movement. So there are 2 bolts on the fuel rail. If you can tell, the one that's up there, there's the fuel rail right here, and then that bracket back there that I shine my light on, that is the second rail, and there is an 8mm socket right there holding it on. That just gives you a little bit of freedom of movement. Alright, so now let's actually deal with the coil pack. So that one right there is the one we're changing. So that electric plug on the bottom, there is a pin that you just pull up on with your thumb. I might be able to show you a little better over here. So on the bottom of that plug right there, there is a little tab that you can depress that will let off the tension, so you can pull that off. Don't have to pull hard, don't have to press hard. Just so you know, there's a little tab on the bottom of it that helps you get that unplugged. As you can tell on here, also with the plug, there is a nut right there. It's a 7mm, and you have to pull that off, and then once you're done with that, once you get that completely taken out, that coil will just pop right out. It doesn't depress onto the spark plug or anything like that. It just basically sets on it. So that's all. Alright, so now I've got the bolt out. I've got it unplugged. We'll stick the plug kind of down over here out of the way. But so now I've got it all unplugged and ready to pull out. So let's see if I can pull it out gently. Oop. That's all it takes. It pops right out. Sometimes this bottom part right here, there's a spring inside of here. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but that spring, there's dielectric grease in it. But that spring is basically what sets onto the spark plug. And there's times that when you take these out, this bottom boot will come apart from here, and that spring will be completely apart. So make sure that the spring comes out. If it doesn't look like it's come apart, make sure that spring is still inside of there. So this one actually works. So I will put it back into here, so that way I don't get them confused, because this is the OEM stock one that came on the truck that I replaced the broken one with. This one, I replaced it with this, so that way I could just test it to see if that was the issue, or if it was spark plugs or something more than this. If it was maybe the injectors, but with my computer and doing those couple steps, like I said, unplugging it, plugging it back in, swapping them if you can. One thing you can do if you don't have a spare, you can swap coils for, like, you could take this one and put it on this one to see if your problem switches to that cylinder or if it stays on this cylinder. If it stays on this cylinder, it could be an ejector or something with the fuel that's causing the misfire. It could be the plug that runs to the PCM or something like that. But That's one way that you can also do it. I wouldn't suggest doing that because then you could mess up that second cylinder, but that is one way that you can figure it out pretty easily. Is you could swap cylinders, or like me, if you have one extra one, it's not hard, just pop it in, pop it out. Takes a little bit of time, but then that way you know you're 100% right. So I like to replace them with Motorcraft if possible, especially with stuff like this. We were doing the whole set, so this is why we got these, but to do individual stuff, parts, best you can put on Ford or Ford Motorcraft parts. So like I said, this is a F-150 05. It has a 4.6 in it, and that is the part number off of it. This is a 8-valve cylinder, or 8-valve motor, excuse me, and I've already checked the spark plugs back in it to make sure they are torqued down to spec and all of that. But so this is the part number, and I just actually got this one from a local parts store. I didn't go all the way to the Ford dealer because they were a little more expensive and also didn't come with all of the parts that I needed. So now that we got the old one out, we'll pop this one back in. I will put dielectric grease in the bottom of this for a little bit better of a connection, and we'll go from there. One quick thing before we move on, that is that bolt that actually holds on the coil pack. You can see that brass hole right there. This sets in, so this part sets in the cylinder. This sets onto basically the intake, and then these screw into there's a hole in there where they screw into, and they are not very big, so make sure when you are taking them off, you soak them with WD-40, penetrating oil, MPL, whatever you want to use, just so that way you have a little bit better to take these out. As you can tell, there's a little bit of goop on that. I put some anti-seize on them, just so that way they come out a little easier. That's the hope, at least, but it's just something to help a little bit. So actually, one cool thing, this already has dielectric grease in it, so I'm not going to add much more because there's a good chunk and it's worked around the nipple pretty well. So when the spark plug sits into it, it should get pretty well greased. Be a lot easier to set it on and take it off. That is the big reason with that. Just helps get the spring out, that kind of stuff, so they come out as one piece. So these are placement specific. With it being the 8-cylinder, it's kind of hard back in there to show you guys what's going on, but this bolt hole sits on a certain point in there. I don't know how well if I'll be able to show you guys, but so that right there is where the coil bolts on. That is the little hole and screws that it sets into. So you have to make sure you set it in a spot to where this sets over that, but enough also to where this still plugs in. Make sure before you check them, you check the pins and you check the connector on there. Put a little bit of grease on it. Then make sure they're not bent, they're not broken, they're not trying to start corroding. You don't see any green around them, because if they're starting to get green, that could also be your issue. So make sure you check those out, look at them, so that way you know what is right, what's wrong, and if you have something else going on other than just a bad coil. So we'll set this one in, and I'll kind of show you at that point what we're looking for. One little tip that actually just helped me because I dropped a bolt. Keep a little magnet on hand, because drop a bolt, get it in a spot that you can't reach, extendable magnet, best thing ever. Then you can plug it, especially if you don't hear it drop, kind of look for it. That is the worst thing ever when you're working on a truck, a car, anything. You drop a bolt and you don't hear the sound of it hitting the concrete. That is not a good sound. That means you are in for a scavenger hunt. But get a little magnet, that'll grab it, that'll save you a lot of headaches. Alright, so I've got the bolt in, torqued it down a little bit. Don't put a lot of stank on it. It's not very big, it could break. In here, this is the plug. Got a little bit of dielectric grease on it. Don't want a ton of that either. It might gum it up. So all you gotta do now is just plug it in here for that click. I don't know if you guys heard it or not through the phone, but listen for the click. And then after that, we'll have to tighten up our fuel rail, put everything back together, and then we'll go from there and make sure the truck works. We'll clear clothes, and hopefully that'll be the end of our problems. So one thing about that fuel rail, this Cornwell 1/4" ratchet with this type of head on it works really great to get back in there in that corner. You're not destroying some of the hoses that are going back there. And this, when you can do it with like a screwdriver mode, that way you can tighten it down pretty well and it twists on a lot easier. I really like this ratchet, like the handle on it, but the thing about that one is you don't have a lot of room, so a straight ratchet would be hard to get back in there. Wouldn't be impossible, be hard, but something like this you can stick right on straight, come on the back side where there's no hoses. It makes it a lot easier. So another little tip on that, something like this makes it a lot easier. And it doesn't have to be Cornwell. I was just saying this is a Cornwell ratchet. It actually has a Mac head on it because we don't have a Cornwell guy anymore, so our Mac guy was nice enough to swap heads for us, so that way our ratchet would still work. But just saying, something with a head like this would be really nice to get to those, because even right here with, move this down, even with that right there, get back behind the hoses right there, not hard at all. Twist it right in. Twist it just like that. You can also, if you want to use normal ratchet, fits right in, not hard. It just hits on that hose, that wire right there that runs up. So that right here, if you just put it just right behind it, works really well. Nut driver would work too, but just little heads up, something that might be a little easier. So now we got everything put back. Let's get the truck put back together. So basically, just put it on the air hose. There is a groove right there that sits into this. Fix that. There's that nub right there that fits in between these right here. So work it side to side, up, down, work it into place. Make sure it sets all the way on there. Needed both hands. So there's that. Fix your one little thing. Fix those. Easy access, makes it a lot easier. Make sure it doesn't fall down there around to the side. If you keep it up on top, makes it a lot easier to tighten down. So then we'll go back up here and we'll if you have a Ford truck or car with this kind of air filter holder, whatever you want to call it, air box, you know that this clip can be very sensitive, very annoying, because it sits in a very specific spot. So make sure you got it locked in down there, and once you have that, it should set on pretty easy and clamp down. Into place. Push down on the clamp, make sure everything's all hooked up. We'll come back through and tighten all of our clamps down. Make sure you put this back on. Make sure you hear a click. That's on all of that. That's good, so tighten these down and then we'll be good. So I told you these could come in handy. With the one that I did right here, it didn't really need to. These are hose pliers from Cornwell, and the one thing that I found when I was actually taking this off is this sets down in here really well. So when you're clamping onto these to try to maybe work them up and out and you can't really get a good grip on them, these hose pliers fit in it really well, really easily, and they can give you just that little bit because the added length on your hand. That gives you a little bit of freedom. You can finagle and move it into a position that works best for you to get it completely out without possibly damaging the bottom boot or having the boot rip off. So that was one thing that I found. If you have some hose pliers, get a size that fits around it pretty well and pull them, and they work really well. So for us, like I said, these are our Coil ones. That's the part number for them, CPL3270. They have worked really well, and we've used them quite a bit for different hoses, pulling them off, doing radiator lines, coolant lines. I used them for a older truck of ours to change the heating core. Once you have that all done, you're pretty much done. You've got everything wrapped up. You'll want to start your truck, make sure everything runs back. You might want to clear codes. If you don't have a scan tool, you can go to normally any local auto parts store and they'll clear them for you. But start your engine, make sure everything runs smooth, make sure you have it plugged in, your nuts are tight, all of your air hoses, all your air dam, all of this kind of stuff is what you're done with. Once you put everything back, you think you have everything done, just take a little once over, kind of look through, make sure nothing looks off to you, maybe wiggle some stuff, make sure, because the last thing you need is something to come loose or come undone. Start your truck, make sure it runs, idles like normal, clear code. If you don't have a scan tool, you can go to normally any auto parts store and they'll clear them for you. So hopefully this helps somebody. Thanks.